Welcome everybody to another episode of SF Live. This is episode 16. My name is Kai Hoffmann. I'm the CEO of the Soar Financial Group. Before we start talking with our guest today, Bradford Cooke, the CEO of Endeavour Silver, we're just going to remind you real quick that this is an interactive format and you can use hashtag AskEDR for your questions live during this stream. We're going to be live for about 15-20 minutes, so feel free to start posting your questions right now and we'll get to those towards the end of our conversation here with Brad. We have a list of questions actually prepared for Brad to talk about, given the times we're in. Some of the questions are fairly obvious, obviously. We're going to get to those in a second, but before that, please make sure that you're a follower here on Twitter at Soar Financial. Make sure you turn on the alerts, that way you get notified when we go live again. Also follow us on YouTube or Instagram to get access to our videos directly. Thank you. So let's switch over. Brad, welcome to the show, and I'm going to switch over to this one. I keep still learning the software here for the scenes here. Switching scenes. Brad, thanks for joining us today, and I hope you're doing well and everything's safe with you.
Good morning. All's good.
Fantastic. We got to talk about the obvious elephant in the room, and Corona, COVID is the topic of the day. Right now, it's still taking all the headline news. So I'm really interested, how is Endeavour handling the current situation? How are things going? How has your day-to-day changed right now?
Well, at the end of February, we had our board meeting, and we were asked to put together a coronavirus plan, both preventative and response plan. We spent the first 2 weeks of March diligently putting in place an executive team here in Vancouver, an executive group in Mexico, site-based leaders for each. We have medical personnel at each site. So I was a bit actually concerned at how slow things seem to be moving, and we had a management call just before mid-March to go live on the plan when we were informed by our VP Ops that we had potentially our first case. And so our group swung into action, and fortunately within 24 hours all the symptoms were gone and it was a false alarm, but we had 2 cases that weekend that both were not confirmed, thankfully. But it really tested our plan and our ability to respond. We self-isolated the individuals. We isolated their compatriots. We sterilized their workplaces. It was basically a go-go weekend, and we came out of it, I think, with flying colors. Very proud of our group. To this date, 6 weeks later, we've still not had a positive test of COVID-19 at any of our sites. So from an Endeavour point of view, very good.
Fantastic. So I think Mexico has less than 9,000 cases right now, and it hasn't been impacted as much, fortunately. I'm curious to see like analysis on it, whether that's a weather-related thing because it's just warmer there or something, and only the northern hemisphere is sort of impacted by that. But quite curious to see how that's playing out, because as of today, I think Mexico has entered phase 3 of the pandemic, from what I understand. And I'm just curious, like, so you also to learn more about Endeavour's plans on restarting the mines. Or one thing is Mexico mentioned that mining might come back April 30th. I think the limitations might run out then officially. What's the plan there, and can you give us an update on the operation side now?
So the Mexican response was very slow, and our view on the whole situation in Mexico is kind of good news, bad news. The bad news is that Mexico was not prepared, and AMLO was kissing babies up till 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And then they went straight to stage 2, so non-essential industries shut down April 1st, including mining, and we all suspended our mines at that time, except, interestingly enough, for the big Mexican companies who deem themselves essential and have stayed open. And so the good news, bad news aspect of that is that even though Mexico is 2 weeks behind America and haven't even come to the steep part of their own curve yet, there does appear to be on a per capita basis quite a lower incident rate, less than 10,000 cases, less than 1,000 deaths. Of course, they don't have the testing that others do, but the interior, especially the area of the mines, the central part of the country, there doesn't appear to be much spread of the coronavirus in Durango, Zacatecas, Chihuahua, etc. So I think we're lucky in that way. Since the government declared the national emergency and went straight to stage 2 on March 31st, most of the mines have shut down. From our point of view, we're basically spending $2.5 million a month here to stand still. So what's new is that the president on Sunday came out and said that he would open up non-essential activities May 17th in the 900 municipalities with no known cases of COVID-19. And all of our mines are located in such municipalities. So we're now actually preparing to go back to work mid-May.
How long is that ramp up period? It's like, I'm really curious, like ramp ups, you can't shut down a mine overnight. You don't just flick a switch and leave and, drop the keys in the mailbox and you're out of there, right? How long does the ramp up take to get to pretty much back to 100%? Because it's just not that simple.
Yeah, well, ramp down was basically 2 days because you select the key people who need to stay for safety and security and whatnot, and then you just basically let everybody else go home and stay safe. Ramp up is 2 weeks because you got to contact everybody and arrange their transportation, and even though we don't have very many expats, we have to consider a 2-week quarantine if we bring expats back. So it's actually quite complicated, and we're in the planning stage now, even though we're a month away from a possible restart.
Interesting. And but you haven't given out any guidance or like earnings warnings or something like that, like the big Dow companies all do, say Q2 is just going to be messed up, but don't even bother? Or
well, we and everybody else just withdrew our guidance, and guidance is suspended until we know what the heck's happening.
Exactly, that makes sense. So you said costs are actually, and I think that's quite interesting. It's $2.5 million a month for you just to do nothing, right? So you got to keep people on payroll. I'm not sure you can furlough, or I'm not even sure if Mexican government has announced any programs, financial aid programs. I haven't seen anything going through the news here real quick this morning. But is there any support from the government, any tax breaks, or at least tax pauses or something on paying?
We're getting quite aggressive fiscal stimulation from Canada, U.S. I don't know if it's true in Germany. We're certainly seeing it in Asia. Mexico, nothing. I mean, they beefed up the health department resources, and that was about it.
Okay. Okay, so you're pretty much left alone there for now. Yeah, interesting. Since how much cash do you have in the bank? Is that sustainable? Like, let's say push comes to shove, because we're just at the
year-end cash was 23 million. Year-end working cap was just under 40. We've depleted obviously in the first quarter because our big capital spend is usually in Q1. So we're going to guess that end of Q1 cash is around 16, working cap in the mid-30s. So we don't have any long-term debt. We got a healthy balance sheet, but our cash is a bit lower than we'd like. And the sooner we get started, the better, obviously.
No, that makes sense. Let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's talk about the gold price and silver price in general. Because of the recent gold price move, Endeavour has become a gold producer on a percentage basis, per revenue basis, right? So you said, or you were usually a 55 to 60% silver producer. Now it's pretty much the other way around. Can you give us more detail on that? Let's talk about the silver price itself, too. So
we're very happy to have we used to call gold our byproduct, and now actually it's the silver that's the byproduct. And at the current metal prices, we're very happy to be a gold producer. It'll swing back and forth based on the gold-silver ratio, obviously. And I do think that the ratio is going to come down over the course of the year. People wonder what the heck is wrong with silver. It went basically from the 85 ratio all the way to 125. Currently, 110, 115, something like that. So it's pulled off of the high. We're not out of the woods yet on the ratio by any means, but the fact is gold has played its traditional role. Coming out of a period of market panic, everything got sold down, including gold and silver, but immediately the first sector to respond is gold. Why? Because it's not only a hard asset, it's the only hard asset that's portable. It's not real estate, it's not factories, it's portable. And that's why it's been used for millennia as money. Silver, because it's emerged in recent decades as a strategic industrial metal, only responds to the monetary influence after gold has already taken the lead. Wherever gold goes, silver follows. Silver lags behind gold and then plays catch-up. We're lagging gold. We haven't played catch-up yet. It's coming.
Okay. Here's the clickbait question for you. Has the drop in oil price, does that make any difference to your guys' operations, and what kind of cost savings can you expect from that?
Actually, very little, partly because we're an underground mine that doesn't use a lot of diesel, and partly because Mexico sold forward or hedged their entire annual Pemex production in January at $49. So there's no break at the pumps in Mexico because they're still getting $49 for their oil. So yeah, we're not going to benefit from the oil.
Oh, that's too bad. So you're not actually getting money for burning it, yeah? So,
Well, we are benefiting from the peso. The peso is depreciated from 19 to 24 against the U.S. dollar. That's a 25% depreciation in 3 months. So that's a nice tailwind for us. Only about 30-40% of our costs are peso costs, primarily labor. So that if you do the net, it's about an 8% benefit so far year to date. But we'll take that. We like that.
yeah,
And I think the peso is getting weaker.
yeah. No, especially since the pandemic is just about to hit Mexico, really, and that's the thing, right? So,
and the other thing to point out, we used our guidance prices this year: $17 silver and $14.25 gold. Obviously, at 15.5 silver and high 1600s gold, we're offside on our silver production in terms of revenues, but we're way onside in terms of our gold revenues. So it more than offsets the shortfall in the silver price, and it is, I believe, temporary.
You mentioned temporary, but I was still going to ask, like the gold and silver price right now, does that make any difference to your production schedule or plans and reserve model as well?
Not really. We're not adjusting our plans because I think this is a month-to-month thing. I don't think it's a year-to-year thing. And, it's not easy to change plans. We have our reserves, and that's what we're going to mine for the year, and they should do just fine at these prices.
Okay. Now, we don't often talk to producers. We're usually chatting more with the exploration side of things. And for them, $1,600 gold price, all of a sudden they have a 100% increase in reserves, and they're happy to put that out every week, right? So producers are a little more conservative in that regard. Let's switch over to some questions we got, and we got some questions in from an analyst actually who wants to stay anonymous, but I think they're really good questions, and I'd like to remind everybody to use hashtag AskEDR for your questions here on Twitter. We'll get to those in a second as well. So we pretty much talked about restrictions on mining. That was one of his first questions. Any data points indicating that the restrictions might be extended? You said May 17th, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be pretty much the date when the municipalities that haven't been affected can start non-essential businesses again, or reopen non-essential businesses, just to confirm.
Yes, that's what the president announced.
Okay, cool. EDR itself, like there's a question about mergers and acquisitions. Obviously, the market has seen a run to liquidity, and a lot of silver projects or gold projects have been hit hard. They're slowly rebounding. But how aggressively are you looking at mergers and acquisitions right now?
We're always pretty aggressive. So last year we pulled the trigger on a small brownfields acquisition in Guanaceví, but it was a real game changer for the asset because it extended the mine life by several years and gave us instant access to new high grade. The context of that acquisition was that we picked up some ground immediately adjacent to 2 high grade ore bodies that we mined up to property boundaries, and we worked on the acquisition for years and finally got it done last year. And we literally were able to go to the property boundary and start mining again. We have a similar opportunity at Bolañitos this year. 3 ore bodies that stop at property boundaries. We've been in advanced discussions, and we're obviously hopeful that we'll get something done. And what it does is 2 things. It gives you a significant extension to mine life, multi-year extension to mine life, and it gives you instant access to more high grade and allow you to fill the plants. Both of our plants right now at Guanaceví and Bolañitos are running below their capacities, and with more access to high grade ore, you not only get more throughput, you get more metal because of the higher grades.
Yeah. Okay, that's fantastic. Obviously, gold at $1,680 or close to $1,700 again. And do you see more generalists now coming back into the sector? And I've been saying for years now that we needed a bigger drop in the Dow Jones and S&P before generalist investors come back into our sector, which is a high-risk sector, because it was too easy to make your 20-25% in the main markets. Do you see more interest now coming back?
Well, absolutely. We've seen a rising tide of passive investing for several years now, and I think 40% of Endeavour is owned by passive investors. A lot of them smallish, but they don't talk to us. It's not like they talk to management. It's all algorithmic driven. No. And so what we're seeing is that in the bigger markets, just in recent weeks, as a result of the COVID-19 panic and then the follow-on bounce back, we've seen a spike in volatility during the panic. Volatility came down during the bounce back of the broad equities and the strengthening of gold. Now, actually, we're starting to see the equities soften again. We're seeing volatility tick up in the last few days. So the generalists are very short term, is basically my point, that they're coming to gold on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. They're not yet coming to gold to stick.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I've heard from various companies similar things. Like some companies receive inbound calls from pension funds trying to co-fund a project acquisition, while others just crickets. It's just really not. I wouldn't say it's a generalist comeback. So
there is sticky money out there, but for a company like Endeavour, a market cap of over 200 million US, what we're seeing is more of the family office, wealth management, small cap funds that are interested in taking positions in a gold company or a silver company, and that's where we're seeing sticky money for us.
Okay. Just coming back real quick to the project acquisitions, are you just focused on Latin America, or actually hear that a lot of Mexican companies, for instance, producers, are going further north? They're looking in the US or even in Canada and start sniffing around data rooms. Is there anything, are you focused on Latin America exclusively?
Not exclusively. We've been actively looking at assets in Canada and the States for several years, and we have no problem buying north of the Mexican border or south, to be honest. And we have an office now for several years in Chile. It's an exploration office, but we've looked at some producing assets in Chile last year, and we'll continue. So that's the other part of the M&A strategy. In addition to small brownfields acquisitions in Mexico, we would love to break the small underground mine mold and actually acquire something bigger, an open pit. We don't mine gold. We love silver. So that's basically our sweet spot.
Okay, sounds good. More project-specific or operation-specific question. You mentioned that you were going to switch workforce from contractors to employees at Guanajuato. Is that plan still in place, or what's the plan moving forward there, and the impact on operating costs?
So we're always going to use some mining contractors for mine development at Guanajuato and Bolañitos. It's just that we felt we had too many last year, and we've been paring back. So that's really the message on contractors at Guanajuato and Bolañitos. There's still going to be some there, but fewer.
Okay. Moving forward, in the next 3 to 6 months, obviously news flow is more or less dictated by COVID-19 and Corona. Is there anything else you have in the pipeline that you plan to put out, or is production results are going to be iffy and financial guidance and stuff, but anything in terms of exploration? Are you doing any greenfield exploration, or what can investors make more? Let's generalize it. What can investors expect in the next 3 to 6 months from you?
We had a very busy exploration quarter in Q1, and we only shut down the exploration at the end of March as well. So there is actually some pretty good drill news we expect it to flow here in the next few weeks, both Guanajuato and Bolañitos. Terronera, which is our next core asset and potentially our largest and lowest cost mine, also is going to have some news. This quarter, we're expecting a presentation to the board on May 12th, and not long after that, we hope to say something publicly about the final optimization of our pre-feasibility study. We're all assuming that the recommendation will be to go to full feasibility, which is less than $2 million in less than a year, so we're fully funded to take care of the next step at Terronera as well. And full fees would actually open up a number of debt financing opportunities for us.
Fantastic. Brett, thank you so much for coming on the show. We just hit our time limit. This is great. Really appreciate it. Thanks for asking or answering all the questions we had. I think it was really insightful also for the investors joining, just to talk about what's going on in the area in Mexico itself. Everybody, thanks for your questions. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Make sure to follow us here on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next one tomorrow.